The letters WVB are also branded very distinctly on his forehead, interrupted a second equerry. I suppose them, of course, to be the initials of William von Berlifitzing, but all at the castle are positive in denying any knowledge of the horse. Extremely singular, said the young baron with a musing air, and apparently unconscious of the meaning of his words. He is, as you say, a remarkable horse, a prodigious horse, although, as you very justly observe, of a suspicious and untractable character. Let him be mine, however, he added after a pause. Perhaps a rider like Frederick of Metzengerstein may tame even the devil from the stables of Berlifitzing. You are mistaken, my lord. The horse, as I think we mentioned, is not from the stables of the Count. If such had been the case, we know our duty better than to bring him into the presence of a noble of your family. True, observed the baron dryly, and at that instant a page of the bedchamber came from the palace with a heightened colour and a precipitate step. He whispered into his master's ear an account of the sudden disappearance of a small portion of the tapestry in an apartment which he designated, entering at the same time into particulars of a minute and circumstantial character. But from the low tone of voice in which these latter were communicated, nothing escaped to gratify the excited curiosity of the equerries. The young Frederick, during the conference, seemed agitated by a variety of emotions. He soon, however, recovered his composure, and an expression of determined malignancy settled upon his countenance, as he gave peremptory orders that the apartment in question should be immediately locked up and the key placed in his own possession. "Have you heard of the unhappy death of the old hunter Berlifitzing?" said one of his vassals to the baron, as after the departure of the page, the huge steed which that nobleman had adopted as his own plunged and curveted with redoubled fury down the long avenue which extended from the palace to the stables of Metzengerstein. "No," said the baron, turning abruptly towards the speaker. "Dead, say you?" "It is indeed true, my lord, and to a noble of your name will be, I imagine, no unwelcome intelligence." A rapid smile shot over the countenance of the listener. "How died he?" "In his rash exertions to rescue a favourite portion of his hunting stud. He has himself perished miserably in the flames." "Indeed," ejaculated the baron, as if slowly and deliberately impressed with the truth of some exciting idea. "Indeed," repeated the vassal. "Shocking," said the youth calmly, and turned quietly into the palace. From this date a marked alteration took place in the outward demeanour of the dissolute young Baron Frederick von Metzengerstein. Indeed, his behaviour disappointed every expectation, and proved little in accordance with the views of many a manoeuvring mamma, while his habits and manner, still less than formerly, offered anything congenial with those of the neighbouring aristocracy. He was never to be seen beyond the limits of his own domain, and in this wide and social world was utterly companionless, unless indeed that unnatural, impetuous, and fiery-coloured horse, which he henceforward continually bestrode, had any mysterious right to the title of his friend. Numerous invitations on the part of the neighbourhood for a long time, however, periodically came in. "Will the baron honour our festivals with his presence?" "Will the baron join us in a hunting of the boar?" "Metzengerstein does not hunt." "Metzengerstein will not attend," were the haughty and laconic answers. These repeated insults were not to be endured by any imperious nobility. Such invitations became less cordial, less frequent. In time they ceased altogether. The widow of the unfortunate Count Berlifitzing was even heard to express a hope that the baron might be at home when he did not wish to be at home, since he disdained the company of his equals, and ride when he did not wish to ride, since he preferred the society of a horse. This, to be sure, was a very silly explosion of hereditary pique, and merely proved how singularly unmeaning our sayings are apt to become when we desire to be unusually energetic. The charitable, nevertheless, attributed the alteration in the conduct of the young nobleman to the natural sorrow of a son for the untimely loss of his parents, forgetting, however, his atrocious and reckless behavior during the short period immediately succeeding that bereavement. Some there were indeed who suggested a too haughty idea of self-consequence and dignity. Others, again, among them may be mentioned the family physician, did not hesitate in speaking of morbid melancholy and hereditary ill health, while dark hints of a more equivocal nature were current among the multitude. Indeed, the Baron's perverse attachment to his lately acquired charger, an attachment which seemed to attain new strength from every fresh example of the animal's ferocious and demon-like propensities, at length became in the eyes of all reasonable men a hideous and unnatural fervour. In the glare of noon, at the dead hour of night, in sickness or in health, in calm or in tempest, the young Metzengerstein seemed riveted to the saddle of that colossal horse, whose intractable audacity so well accorded with his own spirit. There were circumstances, moreover, which, coupled with late events, gave an unearthly and portentous character to the mania of the rider and to the capabilities of the steed. The space passed over in a single leap had been accurately measured and was found to exceed, by an astounding difference, the wildest expectations of the most imaginative. The Baron, besides, had no particular name for the animal, although all the rest in his collection were distinguished by characteristic appellations. His stable, too, was appointed at a distance from the rest, and with regard to grooming and other necessary offices, none but the owner in person had ventured to officiate or even to enter the enclosure of that horse's particular stall. It was also to be observed that although the 3 grooms who had caught the steed as he fled from the conflagration at Berlifitzing had succeeded in arresting his course by means of a chain bridle and noose, yet not one of the 3 could with any certainty affirm that he had, during that dangerous struggle, or at any period thereafter, actually placed his hand upon the body of the beast. Instances of peculiar intelligence in the demeanour of a noble and high-spirited horse are not to be supposed capable of exciting unreasonable attention, but there were certain circumstances which intruded themselves by force upon the most sceptical and phlegmatic, and it is said there were times when the animal caused the gaping crowd who stood around to recoil in horror from the deep and impressive meaning of his terrible stamp, times when the young Metzengerstein turned pale and shrank away from the rapid and searching expression of his human-looking eye. Among all the retinue of the Baron, however, none were found to doubt the ardour of that extraordinary affection which existed on the part of the young nobleman for the fiery qualities of his horse. At least none but an insignificant and misshapen little page, whose deformities were in everybody's way and whose opinions were of the least possible importance. He, if his ideas are worth mentioning at all, had the effrontery to assert that his master never vaulted into the saddle without an unaccountable and almost imperceptible shudder, and that upon his return from every long-continued and habitual ride, an expression of triumphant malignity distorted every muscle in his countenance. One tempestuous night, Metzengerstein, awaking from a heavy slumber, descended like a maniac from his chamber, and mounting in hot haste, bounded away into the mazes of the forest. An occurrence so common attracted no particular attention, but his return was looked for with intense anxiety on the part of his domestics, when after some hours' absence the stupendous and magnificent battlements of the Palace Metzengerstein were discovered crackling and rocking to their very foundation, under the influence of a dense and livid mass of ungovernable fire. As the flames, when first seen, had already made so terrible a progress that all efforts to save any portion of the building were evidently futile, the astonished neighborhood stood idly around in silent, if not pathetic, wonder.
But a new and fearful object soon riveted the attention of the multitude, and proved how much more intense is the excitement wrought in the feelings of a crowd by the contemplation of human agony than that brought about by the most appalling spectacles of inanimate matter. Up the long avenue of aged oaks which led from the forest to the main entrance of the Palace Metzengerstein, a steed, bearing an unbonneted and disordered rider, was seen leaping with an impetuosity which outstripped the very demon of the tempest. The career of the horseman was indisputably on his own part uncontrollable. The agony of his countenance, the convulsive struggle of his frame, gave evidence of superhuman exertion. But no sound save a solitary shriek escaped from his lacerated lips, which were bitten through and through in the intensity of terror.
One instant, and the clattering of hoofs resounded sharply and shrilly above the roaring of the flames and the shrieking of the winds. Another, and clearing at a single plunge the gateway and the moat, the steed bounded far up the tottering staircases of the palace, and with its rider disappeared amid the whirlwind of chaotic fire. The fury of the tempest immediately died away, and a dead calm sullenly succeeded. A white flame still enveloped the building like a shroud, and, streaming far away into the quiet atmosphere, shot forth a glare of preternatural light, while a cloud of smoke settled heavily over the battlements in the distinct colossal figure of a horse.